Hey, Mediterranean. We talked about that. That was the thing we did. We did this thing.
No.
VR, yes. Good, so good. Alrighty.
Grace hates me.
Okay. Yeah? I don't think we did.
No. Yeah, we started it. Oh, we did. Wait, we did. You have another Southern Europe? Yeah.
Right, so we're still on winds, because wind's a big deal. And the other two you should know from this section. Mistrals and Sirocco's. Mistrals are from the north, Sirocco's are from the south. Good way to remember that is Sirocco's come from Morocco. Yes, I know, but a rhyme. It's a rhyming joke. And Morocco's in Africa. Actually, let's tell you something about it too, because these Sirocco's actually come from Africa, blowing in warm Saharan air across the Mediterranean into the southern part. So again, impacting weather. Mistrals, on the other hand, coming from the north, bring cold air, and essentially this all meets the Alps and redistributes everywhere else, creating this very weird climate zone that is Europe. No joke. There was actually this time period in medieval history where they were growing grapes in England. If you know anything about growing grapes, you have to have a warm climate to do so. Otherwise, you get kind of janky grapes, and it doesn't really help you for making wine or whatever you're making. So, how are they able to do this? We don't know. To this day, scientists are a little confused how that could have happened. And one of the possible suggestions is a reversal of these winds, thus distributing the solar energy other places. Hello. Is it for me? No. Oh,
You'll be happy.
Sucker. It is for you. You get mail. It's okay, she got mail. It's cool. I wouldn't even discuss it.
What'd you get, Ashlyn?
That's some Blue's Clues stuff right there. Blue's Clues weekend too. It's basically a part of it. Anyway, so yeah, that's that pretty much. It's a pretty simple sentence, I really feel. And here's the thing is, guys, you don't have to write everything that's up here, it's down. How many guys have ever heard a teacher say, oh, the teacher puts that on the board, you should write it down? That is a lie. And I'll tell you why. Right? Here's the thing is, that logic of doing that came back from the day of blackboards, right? Where teachers would literally write as they were lecturing, so that if they wrote it down, oh man, it was important, you got to write it down. How do teachers write on the blackboard nowadays? Few, if any. Sort of probably does, because again, that's an actual product. He's showing you how to do something. But as far as that makes sense. But as far as most content areas like social studies, theology, English, all these things, probably not as often, because frankly, it's more efficient to type it out. Trust me, if you see my handwriting, you don't want to be taking notes that I handwrite. It is atrocious. So I make up these things. Here's the thing is, I can have this done years before you ever take it. I can finish this up, type it up. I can spend hours writing this wall of text, and I can talk about it faster than you can pray to keep up with me in writing. Yes? I mean, I could have been done after 5 seconds and moved on. So there is absolutely no way you can keep up with me if I start going fast. Right? So, but you can't. There's a trick to it. Yeah. How much of this do you really need to write to get the gist of what is said? Not even that.
Just one.
Maybe 6 words? Let me show you. Like if I was writing this, I was through sheets, right? I look at this and say, okay, there's 3 key words here, 3 proper names of things, yes? Alps, Mistral, Sirocco, right? Mm-hmm. All right, goes down. No, not yours. Maybe you were. All right, so I have the basic ideas there. Now I just need to be able to identify these, and I know. So these are cold winds. These are warm winds. These are a barrier.
I can be ready.
So, Alps, a burial, Mistral, cold winds, Sirocco, warm winds. Done. 9 words. It's fake work. So this took way less time than writing that, yes? This is something that you absolutely have to learn to do. Because I'm going to tell you right now, in class, we tend to be like, okay, take your time. At least, I think most of the time, I could be wrong. I tend to do that. I don't know, maybe there are teachers out there who are like, no, right answer, and just move on. I don't know these things. But I'm just saying is that's a possibility. But I guarantee in college, they don't care. They just go. And I'm going to tell you right now, most college professors are absolutely like awful PowerPoint writers. I'm not going to lie, this is pretty bad. These PowerPoints are not good. College professors are worse. Yes.
Yesterday, we said that woman for OEH.
Skill words.
And then today we're saying that they're super gross. So which one?
You mean phones?
Sure.
Or phones. It's actually pronounced like, hello, phone. Okay, those are in two different areas.
Okay.
We're in Mediterranean,
okay.
we're in Southern. That was in Western. So otherwise, similar but different. Yeah.
My sister is a biology teacher that at the last 10 minutes, instead of just letting the class out, like once they get done with the chapter, he starts jumping to the next one and teaching twice as fast and going through the slides twice as fast. And it's just like, no one's listening. Why are you doing this to us?
Torture, mean, all that stuff. Yeah, they're not very good at it. Phones, really. Anyways, let me show you some pictures. So this actually shows Sirocco's. Again, going across the Mediterranean, and if you think about it, that's what we're looking at right there. It's pretty toasty there. Sahara Desert, biggest desert in the world. In fact, desert, you guys know what Sahara is in Arabic? It means desert. So, Al-Sahara just means desert in Arabic. So it's desert. The desert. And of course, that would be from the Nordic Peninsula. So we have these forces interacting with the Alps and redistributing energy, thus creating some kind of interesting effects. As far as this effect on people's livelihoods, these affect different types of plants that grow in these areas. For instance, the Mediterranean is known exclusively for chaparral, which is sort of shrubs and trees that grow in kind of these hardy areas, or they're hardy shrubs and trees that grow in these areas. So for instance, plants that are included in chaparral are things like olives and grapes, which if you think about, like Italian food, how much olive is in Italian food? Even if you're not talking about olives themselves, but olive oil, oh man, yeah, absolutely. And wine, of course. This is wine country, this is wines and everything. So we can see this effect. And honestly, olive oil has played an important role in this area for centuries. It was actually used for skincare. It was used in really expensive soaps and even some lanterns. And there's all kinds of great stuff you can do with olive oil. So, I mean, it's played a major role in their society for a very, very long time. So it's really no major surprise. However, understand that there are other uses that maybe we wouldn't necessarily consider. For instance, let's talk the Olympics for just a second. Do you guys know where the Olympics originated from? Where that came from, where that word comes from? Yeah. Well, yes, the Greeks, but what words is it? Yeah, Olympus, sure. It was a celebration of the gods of Olympus, absolutely. And so they had a games to celebrate this, but also to kind of relieve tensions between the city-states, because they kind of like to fight wars. So there's a way to prevent folks from fighting. It's competition that doesn't end in violence. Well, most of the time there was wrestling. But here's the other thing is, if you look at a lot of the original games that were celebrated, or played, I should say, many of them were skills of warriors. I mean, some of them seem obvious, like wrestling is fighting, javelins are spear throwing. But what about stuff like running? How is that warriors training? I've never known anyone in the military, they grew up running, don't they? You know why? It's because fighting is physically draining. And we're not talking about Call of Duty here, sitting behind a chair and working your thumbs. You're talking like serious hand-to-hand combat fighting, punching, rolling around, all this kind of stuff, and working with big units, marching over time. You need that endurance. So this was something that naturally went along with this, as did swimming and some other kind of interesting sports. I had heard that pole vaulting was allegedly something that people would use to try to jump over city walls and things like that. I don't know how true that is, but it seems like an interesting story at the very least. But here's the other thing. When they originally competed in these sports, they did it completely in the nude. The reason for that was because they didn't want to give anyone one specific advantage. The only advantage that they gave was that you would be covered in olive oil. This was to make it harder to grasp someone. So for instance, in wrestling, they were both oiled, so like whenever you got a hold of someone, put them in the lock, they could slip out of it possibly, so you had to have a lot more skill. There was also a sport allegedly like football, where you would carry this kind of thing over goal markers, and they were decked out in this olive oil. And I heard stories where like you get running, you like get tackled with and go sliding across the ground, like you just imagine being covered in oil and stuff sticking to you. And so they had these like fan-shaped tools that once you kind of got stuff stuck to you, you just kind of go and scrape everything off like a squeegee. So just kind of like remove all the dead grass and crap that sticks to you, because this is how you did it. Well, hey, so anyways, all well played important role here. As far as Northern Europe is concerned, again, this is mostly humid continental as far as climate is concerned. A lot of the area has coniferous and deciduous trees. You guys know the difference, correct? Coniferous and deciduous? Did we cover that last section? Yeah, we did. All right, so we have grasslands, tundra, farm, all this fabulous stuff. Did we talk about fairy tale? We did, didn't we? Okay, so we talked about Into the Woods, all that stuff. We also have distinguishing factor in the tundra has permafrost, land that is constantly frozen. Otherwise, this area, has been influenced by their geography in a lot of other ways. For instance, mountains play an important role in the development of independent culture. Have you ever wondered how is it that languages become so different? For instance, most languages in Europe are based on what? Other languages. Latin, sure. So how is it that from Latin we get French, Portuguese, Spanish? Where does that come from? It's basically over time, people speak languages differently as they're isolated from one another. That's why, for instance, we have so many diverse accents in the United States. I mean, if you think about it, everyone has an accent, even if you're not aware of it. And odds are probably pretty good that if you go somewhere else, they're going to be commenting on how much of an accent you have. Weird you out. Don't be aware of this. But mountains play a role in this because by physically isolating and making it hard to move across different areas, cultures tend to develop independently. You can see this in a lot of different places. Everything languages, different foods that are even music. Regardless, for the most part, we're also going to see another major language family in this region in Europe, and that would be, of course, Germanic. Now, of course, we discussed about English being a Germanic language, not a Romance language, not a Latin-based language. But what's interesting and weird about English is it doesn't follow the same rules of logic as German does. German actually, the rules are a little bit more sensible in terms of like, if you guys have been in English class, they're like, why is this way? Like, why do we change the rules for this in this situation but not others? You know what I'm talking about? And, you also get to like words being, the same but meaning totally different things. This is one of the reasons why English is one of the hardest languages on earth to learn. Just take a word like there. Oh my God, how many of you guys are that confused? There, right? Sure. One of my favorites is a lot. ALOC, which is not a thing. Yeah, it's two words. A, lot. Lot being a group of somebody. That's why if you've ever bought something on eBay that's a lot, it'll have like a bunch of different crap in it. Or for instance, a parking lot. Yes? A bunch of cars. Anyways. it's just kind of interesting to see how these words develop, and they're really independently because of these different locations. Mountains, they're important. All right, Eastern Europe, and then we're done. Well, we're done with this section. Guess what we're doing? We're moving on to another one. Hooray! Hey. Guys, we still got 25 minutes in class. Ooh. Disappointment. Huh? We could, but we won't. We could.
We should.
Perhaps. But again, anywho, but this one's pretty simple. You'll notice that there's a lot fewer words, and this is where I want you guys to be when it comes to writing notes. This is really how you should be using bullets, simplify. What's that?
That's what my ones look like.
Fabulous. This is the Cambridge method. This is what I tend to recommend to folks. You can absolutely do the Cornell system, but I find that less helpful. That's me personally. But anyway, but we have a couple things here. We already talked about the Danube, as long as they're in Africa, or here. Okay. Sorry. That there are various mountain chains that are facing zero in the Caucasus, and that's mostly human climbing as well. Now, while you guys are finishing up, let me talk to you about something completely unrelated to this, because why would not, right? You guys know that Q3 ends next Tuesday, correct? The Tuesday after this one coming up tomorrow. Here's the deal. Do you guys know how many weeks you have from there until the end of the year? 7.
My God.
Now, granted, I'm taking out in that calculation some half weeks, but effectively that's how much time we have. It's not that much. I'm going to tell you right now, that is going to go stupid fast, because just after a few weeks after we get done with stuff next week, we're going to be into spring break, we're going to be moving into the concerts. About the time we get around there, it's time to start studying for the final exam. So, my plan, such that is tomorrow, I want to start talking to you guys about your project, which, as you know, is, I'm going to give you a budget, essentially, and where I don't know, give you a certain amount of money. You must create a budget for living in another country. Explain what it would be like living on a certain amount of money in that country, what your expenses would be, things like that. So it's going to take some research. There's a lot of resources out there for expatriates, people moving from the U.S. to these countries. Those are some good sources for you to use. You do not have to cite your sources for this project. There's no works cited, there's no bibliography, none of that. All you have to do is provide a budget and a PowerPoint or a visual where you explain where you spent your money, why, with pictures, and just kind of tell us what your life would be like if you were living in this country of your choice, okay? That can be whatever city you want in the country, I don't care, but you have to tell me the country by Friday. This Friday. No. And the reason is pretty simple. On Friday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys at one at a time, using a random number generator, to pick out your name on a number grid. What do you want? What country? Once someone names that country is locked, no one else can do it. So, it's whoever gets there first, is long and short. So, you might want to have multiple choices. I recommend 6. 6 different choices. Just in case. In numbers of years, I've had people have like 10 choices, and all 10 of theirs got picked. That does happen, especially when someone's like, London, England, Paris, France, Madrid, Spain, the kind of capitals of various European countries. If you want to do something utterly different, you might look somewhere else, like South America or Asia, for instance. Asia, yes. Asia. So, it's up to you. Okay? That's Friday. Now, you don't have to have anything written down. Just come having an idea of what you might want to do. Tomorrow, you guys need to bring a device with you. Okay? iPads are fine. Tablets are fine. Phones are okay, but you're probably going to hate your life a little bit. Sorry. Ultimately, what you're doing is creating a spreadsheet. And you have to be comfortable with functions. Okay? That's one of the reasons I think laptops are best, because a lot of times they have a function button. Tablets don't, so you have to type them out, which is kind of annoying, but it's not that big a deal. But essentially, the functions you're going to have to know are, and you can sums and minus. Okay? And if you don't know what that means, it's basic math terms. Sum minus. And what you're going to do is you're going to do something like this, parentheses, and it might be sum A1 colon A6 in parentheses. And it might be minus A23 comma A24 in parentheses. Here, that probably needs something else. Sum means add cells A1 through A6 is what column means. So basically, every cell between A1 and A6, including those two, add together. Make sense? So when we're doing a budget, you can have all these items, and it's going to add those together, right? Minus is the opposite of that. It's taking this number minus this number. I realize it's reversed, it's a little weird, but that's how it works. So what we're going to do is, using these two functions, we're going to construct an automated budget. So when you type in numbers, it's going to calculate everything for you. Once you do the functions correctly, it'll show all your money's expenses for a year. So it's super duper easy. Okay? That's all there is to it. It's pretty simple, really. We could probably get that knocked out in, well, I'll be recording it so you guys can do it on your own, but I'll be done with it in about 5-10 minutes. I'm going to show you exactly one that's already completed, and then I'm going to show you how to do it. Okie dokes? All right, so we're on to region. Okay? And I'm going to start with history. Okay? Because I find one of the things that people aren't as aware of is how history influences the culture of places. And the thing is, it really, really heavily influences places, maybe without us even realizing it. For instance, something in the United States. Why is it that we are so work intensive? Meaning, we spend a lot of time working in this country. Don't believe me? Let's talk about this for a second. Do you guys know on average how many days of paid vacation American workers take on average per year?
7.
No. 2. Most American workers on average take 2 paid vacation days per year. Do you know how much they take in Germany? 4 weeks. Do you know how much they take off in France? 6 weeks. They're actually in the process of petitioning for AIDS. That's 2 months.
They must love their lives.
Yeah, I guess it depends on who you ask.
I mean, like, they must not be like...
As stressed? No, they're not. They're absolutely not. They have way less problems with heart attacks. And the fact is, in some countries like Germany, like let's say that you haven't taken vacation because you're just work, and you're happy working, and it gets around to, say, October, they don't let you come back until you've used them all. It's like you have to go away. You're not coming back till January. Well, your friends.
Is that like a law that they have to have?
Law, no. Cultural trend, yes. Let me put it that way. That would be an extreme example. They never have to do that. People almost always take off. And the fact is that they tend to shut down earlier. That means, essentially, they're more productive. The funny thing is, they're just as productive as American workers are for the same amount of time. It's just American workers tend to slack off a little bit more. So it's like, 2 hours of work, spend 3 hours on Reddit, 2 more hours of work. That's how it works. This is partially a cultural thing. There's a lot of stuff in our culture that says you should work hard. If you don't work hard, it's bad. Seriously, think about it. We even have the expression wasting time, as implying this is a valuable resource, and if you're not using it to produce something, you're wasting it. You know? I have said so many instances where I'm like, man, I'm so looking forward, I can't wait till this thing happens. And someone says, well, don't wish your life away. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff in our society that is, laziness is bad, work good. You guys know why? Let's go back to the founding of the United States. The earliest part, before we get to that, we get to colonization, right? The peoples who first settled in North America, natives, of course, and Spanish, were Puritans, a religious sect from Britain who believed that, basically, anything that's fun is a sin, and the only real virtues in life are purity and hard work. We are puritanical. Other places that didn't have that religious beginnings don't really have that. See, our common culture that we have today is influenced by our history, yes? The same thing applies to Europe, especially for Europe, because if you think about it, we're not that old as a nation. You know, we're not even 300 years old yet. Some of these places have been around for thousands of years. That's just staggering to think about. You know, there are buildings in Europe that have been around longer than 8 of our nation's lifetimes. That's just, what? Craziness, yeah? So we're going to spend a little time looking at that, because this is the history of Europe, actually the history of the world, and how it all stacks together as a timeline, when most people pretty much only know this. Yes, it is. Well, specifically, it is Auschwitz. People are aware of the Holocaust, and that's about it. So we're going to spend some time talking history, okay? Now, first off, we're kind of looking here, and I'm starting our discussion not on the Romans, not on the Greeks, but I'm looking more into the Middle Ages, because you'll find that this is where we start in World Civ. Now, let's start with that concept for a second. Do you guys know what the Middle Ages even means, where that term comes from? Medieval, Dark Ages, where do we say that? It has to do with Rome, I'll tell you that now. Okay, here's why. It falls in the middle, or between, the fall of Rome and the Renaissance. It's essentially European culture as a highlight, you know? And what they see it as, historians generally, is that culture just nosedives during the Dark Ages, and it's just everyone's a barbarian, it's all awful, and frankly, that's not true. There's quite a lot of culture, in fact, there's a lot of great innovations. Now, do you guys know what was the most powerful force, the most powerful organization in Europe during the Dark Ages? The church, the Catholic Church did. It was the only thing that all people could agree on. Otherwise, most of the nations that Europe, we think about, didn't exist. Oh, sure, there were groups of people that would eventually become those nations. For instance, you have the Franks, a barbarian tribe from the Iberian Peninsula who eventually carved out an empire from the decaying flesh of the Roman Empire and established what we call today France. But at the time, they were just a roving horde of barbarians. The fact of the matter was, this instability caused by these roving hordes of barbarians created a need for a new type of governmental system called feudalism. How many of you guys have studied this? Feudalism? Okay, feudalism is kings and queens, right? Here's how it works. A king owns land, right? And he needs to make certain that that land gets farmed and protected. Those are his goals. Because if it gets farmed and protected, he gets tax money. That's good. That means you can live the high life. So, the way you make this work is you appoint your friends, the people you trust the most, to run the land. Say, you get this part of the land to run, you get this part of the land, and so on and so forth. As long as you continue to please me, you keep the land. The second you displease me, you're gone. and usually that's at the end of the sword. So you have to work hard to please the king. Of course, that being said, you not only have to make certain that farmers are farming it, but it's also defended. So you have to raise your own army as well. So let's say that you don't like the king so much, hypothetically, you can take your army and fight against the king, and if you win, you behead the king, and now you're king. Now you own all the land, and rinse, recycle, repeat. This is the literal Game of Thrones. The problem is, one person can administer acres and acres and acres of land. So you have your own friends doing the same thing in smaller microcosms, like a fractal. It goes bigger, bigger, bigger as it works its way down, all the way down to peasants. And those ranks of different people administering different smaller bits of land are where you get the different types of ranks. Dukes, Arquesses, barons, knights. All these folks give service in exchange for land. Now they have to make certain that it's being administered, but they have to defend it, right? And during the time, warfare was decided with melee weapons and bows and arrows, essentially. Now, archers were pretty devastating weapons of war because they could hurt people from a long distance away. However, the real elite were wearing stuff like this. This is a late medieval sugarloaf helmet. Around everywhere from 13th to 14th century. It has a chainmail bishop's mantle, which would wrap around the neck and loosely down the shoulders to protect all this area so you don't get your throat cut. And the helmet itself protects your needle. You don't have to put it on, just get a hand out so you can feel it. If you put it on, two warnings. One, there's a chin strap, so watch it. Number two, it doesn't have like a thing inside, no padding, so it's a little bit rough on the needle. Also, if you have long hair, it might be popping chainmail, so sorry about that. That's yeah,
Okay.
Your head parts.
I thought you were referring to something. I don't really know what I thought.
That's right. I'm just saying, same word. This is an arm piece, specifically going into the elbow. It's all one combined part with the vambrace and obrace. And essentially, you'll see these riveted pieces, these plates, shift and allow you to move, getting a full range of movement. One of the biggest misconceptions I've found is people believe that armor is constricted, you can't move it. It's simply not true, you can't. It is heavy, obviously, but it isn't as bad as people might think. You can feel that around. Watch out for the world.
Oh, wow.
This is a combined breast and back plate. And again, you kind of get the idea here. And these pieces interlock so that when you have the full suit, you're covered head to toe. Now here's the thing is, if you're fighting somebody with something like this, there's not much you can do in terms of, I think I need to clean it again. I'm starting to get a little rusty. If you're hitting somebody with one of these, it's not going to do much. This is an Oakshott Type 13 sword.
Why did they allow you to have so many thumbs?
A couple reasons. One, because actually, believe it or not, I'm actually a trained swordsman.
What?
Yeah, I'd say quasi-Olympic fencer. I was in training to go into the Olympics, and then I had a nervous breakdown, so I stopped. This is when I was 16. And
Actually so sad. That's so cool though.
well, yeah, there are times when I'm like, man, I could have been in Olympics. I'm like, oh my god, with the training. Because let me be honest, it takes over your life if you're going to the Olympics. That's all. It's cool. But most of that I do historic stuff nowadays, and that's another reason why. Besides, this looks big and scary. It's not. It's not sharp at all. I can put my hand on that, no big deal. The only part of this is the business end right here. You don't want to mess with that because that can end somebody. But anyways, so here's the thing: is if I'm using this weapon, I can't cut this. You know. Started a fire before I actually hurt anybody. You know, I just imagine someone doing that battlefield, and this guy's like running over. Stop. It's not it's just, you know. So the trick is, fighting against somebody like that, I have to fight with this sword differently. Because if you think about it, most of the time, I'm just going to shut this off because we're not going to see any more of it today. I get this out of my way. When you see most people in movies fighting, they do something like this. Yeah! 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 It's just stupid. Right, it's awkward and dumb, right? The trick with fighting with the sword in this style is you fight with a shield. This is a one-handed sword. If you're not fighting with a shield, this would be a larger grip, a longer sword. You'd be fighting two-handed. For instance, this position might look really dumb. It's actually called Oberhau in German. And the basic strategy with something like this is it gives you very powerful cuts. And the thing is, it might look really indefensible, but it's not, because this style of fighting of the Wegenschwert involves more offense than defense. So, for instance, let's say someone's like, okay, your opens up, I'm going to poke you to death, right? Just like that, okay? Here's what happens. As they start to commit to the attack, I'm going to do what's called a transverse step and come over to here. Now they're aiming right here. They miss, right? Then I cut their hands off. Now they can't defend themselves. Problem solved. Now let's assume that they're wearing something like that, or they've got one of these dudes on. I can't chop their arms off. Yeah. Well, I'm going to change my stance. Instead, and I realize how dumb this looks. I'm going to do this. This is called half swording or hand swording. I'm actually not gripping the blade like that. That'd be dumb. I'm doing this. I'm pinching the blade. Here's what I do. Right? I'm going to basically use this to wrestle with. I'm going to be really kind of tight. They come in here like they were trying to do a second ago. There's a couple things I can do. Number one, I can swing the blade around like so, catch it on the end right here, and then I can do one of two things. The simplest is I've now got this hook on the inside of their sword. I can push it down, pulling their sword down, and crack them in the face. Once I've done that, and I've dazed them, I take a step forward, reversing the blade, and I work this part right here into the eye hole. If you do that to somebody, it's your job. I don't think anybody wanted to do that unless they're psycho. But keep in mind, people who are coming and invading your lands aren't doing it because they want to spread the good word of the Lord, or perhaps say some Girl Scout cookies. They're there to kill all your peasants. Rape, pillage, and murder. So you defend your people. But it means violence. Now another, and again, really stupid maneuver you can do with one of these swords is this. The first time I ever saw this, I was like, does this dude know how this thing works? Like, seriously, like, does he not know how a sword works? Here's the trick with this, right? I can't hurt a guy in armor like this, but I can use this end and just bash him and bash him and bash him. I can even take this hook and jam it into someone's back. I can work it into the arm plates, like so. I can grab it and hook somebody, pulling them to the ground, or now I can issue what's called the coup de grace, which means death blow. So there's a lot of different things like that. Sure, you don't use a sword like this. I don't have it anymore. I used to have two Olympic swords here. They're a lot thinner, and you fence entirely different.
Are they kind of like the swords on the fair show?
I've never seen that side.
Like that.
This, there's actually a couple different stances. This is traditional. And the objective is to poke them. The reason for that is sword design changed over time. With the invention of gunpowder, this became useless. It just slows you down. No amount of steel armor is going to prevent a bullet. So instead, people stopped wearing the armor so they would speed up, and so swords changed to be faster. So you had eventually the small sword, and from there we had quarter wielding swords. So that style was already different. You also have sabers, which is the style I fence with, which are really thin dudes, and they look like this. This is a saber. And that fencing style is like this. Saber fencing is fast. It basically, if you watch the sport of fencing, which you can find on YouTube, by the way, a match is over, like, it's like, tack, 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 boom, done. And I remember there was a number of matches that I fenced in that was like, step, bam! And it was like a crash of violence and a light goes on. And signals who got points. There's actually rules to the sport of fencing as well. It was to essentially assign who had the better chance of wounding an opponent. So, for instance, one of the best maneuvers in fencing is the lunge. Because essentially, if you think about what's happening, is you are literally stepping up and putting every bit of weight and muscle power in your legs into the point of the sword. You hit something like that, it goes right through it. Yeah.
Most losing matches over, like, it's like stuff, the person that goes first usually wins, because, like, if they go, the person counters, and they counter, and
It depends. Honestly, what you're describing is attack, parry, repose. From my experience in Saber, there's a lot more attack, parry, repose. You know, that was it. First person is going to make you lost it. That's why.
My first question is too hard on the move. You don't have that privilege. That's horrible.
I stopped recording. That's cool. Just turn them in. Stop February.